Hey Riggs, it's Kevin Harrington here. I'm in Ybor City in Tampa at the Board of Advisors event. And this is an organization that actually provides advisors and board members, advisory board members for companies all around the United States. Now, I've been coming to these meetings here at the Board of Advisors, one of the founders, for 8 years. And we have taken companies public out of here. We have raised tens of millions of dollars in capital for companies across the board here. We have so many different opportunities, and you know what though, Riggs, I'm here talking about the Board of Advisors. Really, the board that I'm really concerned about is yours, and that's the one that I'd like to be part of, because we can bring our advisory services, our network of connections, the ability to help you raise capital, et cetera, we will actually build an awesome advisory board in your company and help kick this thing off in a big way. So I'm excited to tell you that I want to be part of your company, part of your board, part of your advisory board, and we want to help you explode. Thank you. I hope you got a good message from the Shark, Kevin Harrington. Take care.
And welcome to the CEO briefing. That, of course, is a little bit of a spoiler because we have an announcement that I'll be telling you all about. I started discussing it last night with the original Shark, Kevin Harrington. But let me go ahead and start things off. Timothy Melton says, wow, his network, nice job, Riggs and staffing. Okay. Yes, we're super excited. Let's jump right in. Thursday, March 7th, and briefing number 252. And we've been saying water is the people's asset, which is very true, but the more and more we're moving towards the tagline, save the planet, recycle water, because that is a very, very, shall we say, enlightening and inspiring message that is going to be in tune with the mission that we're working on with Kevin. You'll know more about it shortly. Okay, so safe harbor statement, the usual disclaimer on any discussions about investment. And let's jump right into X marks the spot. We're being told that hiring is healthy. And what we see here, though, is that the growth in hiring is largely in government sectors. Government and healthcare are not inherently productive. They're taxing us. Government taxes us, of course, and healthcare taxes us to keep us healthy. Things that are trade, business services, look at manufacturing, transportation, warehousing, etc. So that's a picture of what's going on in this market. So, I mean, it's obvious what's going on. Now let's take a look at another report here. Assets. Let's talk about assets. This is a big story right now. Why do I comment on economic matters? It's because the fundamental situation here is that ordinary assets are no longer predictable, and might go up, they might go down. NVIDIA goes up, but NVIDIA can crash, whatever. Who knows? A number of things can happen. But water is a stable asset. It's early. It's not being manipulated yet. And so I take every opportunity to make the comparison, obviously. Yes, indeed. All right. So again, I'm not going to go over these little micro posts that we do, only because that's why you want to be on my X feed. But we actually got into really the story about, what is this all about? We have bingo. This is where I really started getting into the story about Israel has a nearly 90% recycling rate. Second in the world is Spain at 20%. US actually less than 1%. It's about 0.3%. And we worry about droughts. How about not wasting the water you have? Now, Israel recycles because their infrastructure was built with the specific goal of recycling water. Of course, we built ours in the glory days of superabundance when no one was thinking of husbanding resources, just like those concrete LA rivers built solely to get fresh water to the sea as fast as possible. In short, our infrastructure cannot recycle. Once you send your waste to the city, is 99% of the time treated and dumped. The only possible answer is for us to do it ourselves. And by us, I mean industry and agriculture, which are responsible for 90% of all water on demand. Only when a business can treat its own water can it recycle. Never happen otherwise, obviously, because once it sends its water to the city, it doesn't come back. We want to save water We have to do this. And let me tell you, life is getting even worse for the cities. EPA is proposing new rules for handling forever chemicals the cities have no way to pay for as it is. So forget about recycling. So DIY, do-it-yourself water treatment is increasingly the only answer to a desperate situation. And by the way, businesses are happy with that, especially if they don't have to pay up front. Lower inflation, lower water rates because they're reusing it, right? Less intrusion by local government as long as they meet permit requirements. It's a win-win, and Water on Demand is leading the charge. Save the planet, recycle water. So that's kind of a big epiphany that we had last week, where we really understood that this really is our mission. And because we don't just recycle, but in order to recycle, you have to do all the prior steps, which is why this works so well, right? Okay. Well, of course, you know about the debt. I'm not going to get into it. The debt just goes and goes, rises and rises and rises. And I think it's why we're seeing such strength in precious metals and Bitcoin and so forth, because these are assets, right? Okay. This is the top 1% and bottom 50%. It's a sad, sad graph, and it crossed right about 1996. All right. Now, some good news. Recent court decisions in Idaho, Nevada, and Montana have empowered states to enforce stricter groundwater usage rules to combat overpumping. This is great. Again, if we don't recycle, then we're just going to be, how King Canute ordered the waters to recede, and of course they didn't, right? That was the famous story. And here's watereducation.org gave us a nice image here. Okay. We have our first pilot project lined up for Water on Demand, which is our investor finance water treatment. Okay. It's mobile home parks. Why? They're basically all the same. Small application, 5,000 gallons per day, which in Texas is just below the heavy permitting requirements. It's a little Goldilocks area that's just right. We can put them in, plug them in. Permitting is quote unquote nothing. And they meet the requirements and can simply empty their treated wastewater into the groundwater. Everybody wins. So that is what we're working on right now. There'll be more about that. How much fresh water do we have? Well, I've played this before, but since we're talking about recycling, let's jump right into it.
For centuries, we have thought there was more water than land in our planet, because we were told that the ocean covers 3/4 of the planet's surface. But that's the point. This is just on the surface. If we could see the ocean apart, we will notice that the ocean is just an extremely thin and fragile layer covering the surface. This thin layer of water measures just 3/10,000ths of the planet's measurement. If the Earth had 1 meter in diameter, the water on the planet, it will be so thin as an eggshell. If we compact this thin layer into a solid sphere, it will be that small. Next to this Earth, water will be this small sphere of 11 centimeters, less than 1,000th of the volume of the planet. Do I have your attention now? Now, consider this. The ocean's volume is almost all made up of salt water. Fresh water is just 2.5% of the planet's water. Yeah, as frightening as it sounds. Fresh water is just this little sphere, 3 centimeters in diameter. But this tiny amount of fresh water is not all available, because 69% of it is the ice in the poles and the snow in the mountains. 3% is underground water. So, yeah, just 1% of this minuscule sphere is the available water in rivers and lakes. It will be another sphere so little that you can't almost see it. That's it. From this small amount of water depends most of the life on our planet, including us, who are made up of 70% water. The planet's water, the planet's fresh water, and the tiny amount of fresh water available. Now that you know, what are you going to do?
I love this video. It's so cool. And it absolutely makes the point about why it's so vital what we're doing. All right. Let's see what we got here. 2 or 3% inflation, not really happening. But, you and I know the real inflation that's going on. Turns out that Grok knows who we are. Here's Grok, of course, is the Twitter AI. And it was asked a question basically about recycling. AJ, our VP marketing, what would the impact be if the United States recycled 50% of its water? And it talks about all of the stuff, and it includes a post from us. Kind of cool. So we're kind of on Grok's radar. Parabolic Bitcoin, I'm not going to comment about that. It is what it is. We know what it is. There was a great interview that we're going to be getting more footage from, but let's just take a listen to what our discussion was all about. One of the things I like to do is what I call mistake-based marketing. In other words, try things out, but be willing, constantly adjust. And that's a really good philosophy. But you also have to have a goal, right? You can't just be broken field running and maybe turning and going the wrong way. So you need to actually have a direction so that you're zigzagging in the right direction. There's no such thing as a straight line in business. If you're on a straight line, you're probably decaying. So you need to be constantly reinventing because that's the way of the market. But what became real to me is you've got to have a direction you're going. And CEO, above all, is the person who owns that. Okay, this is our big thing. This is what we're trying to do. And a lucky CEO is someone who has people who will actually execute for him, an executive layer, which I didn't have for a long time. I had a lot of people who were dependent on me, but who were kind of like, okay, Riggs, we're good. We're showing up and you got it all. And that has changed. I have a pretty great team. And as a result, I have my attention's freed up to actually create the future. So what I think is that it's super important for anybody who wants to get great things done is as soon as possible to divest a lot of the routine execution stuff so that they can focus on, whoa, what about if we do this? Okay, good, let's launch this and kind of drive the day, shall we say. So that'll be a show that gets into this philosophy a bit more. And as we come up to the present, a couple nights ago, I had an amazing show on TNT Radio Live with Hrvoje Moric. And what was great about it is it was long and we really got into it. We got into the details of the fintech that we're building, and we'll do some excerpting from that. Thank you to Command Your Brand Media for that. Clayton Meeker, who works for our company, continues to be a rock star. Here's a post he made that got about 4,000 views, having to do with an energy thing that he's doing. Every single thing you do out there in social media does build your impact. Okay, I'm a big fan of nuclear power, and it looks like Amazon Web Services is too. They are actually co-locating right there with a major nuclear power plant. And the problem is big nuclear is like big water. It's expensive and takes forever to build. So the idea is decentralized energy. I'll cover it in just a moment here further. All right. Again, good stuff that you should be reading on your own. You definitely need to follow my account because it is interesting stuff. We have been depressing nuclear power like crazy. Look at what has been happening in New York with nuclear going way downhill. And the problem is wind and solar don't keep up. And so guess what? You get more fossil fuels. And this is what's been going on. Look, since 2005, we've only seen natural gas go up, whereas nuclear has fallen off a cliff. Not very smart. And imports are going up. So not great news. Not great news. Energy is so politicized. That's why you need to invest in water. A big problem with data centers, and I think we're going to have a huge opportunity to help data centers with their water needs. Data centers could be sucking up 1.1 to 1.7 trillion gallons of fresh water by 2027. That's pretty crazy. And microplastics in the body, which come from that hand is holding a bunch of plastic, but the microplastics are tiny. You can't even see them. These are in the water and they end up in your body and they're linked to heart attacks and strokes. So water again. And by the way, the number of publicly listed companies in the US has declined by 50% over the past 30 some years. But we make public companies. All right. Now, AJ did some calculations based on looking at a couple different sites. The Bureau of Reclamation is a very good site, Water Facts, and also there is a very good one, C-Metrics, that tells us the startling information, which is that less than 0.3% of total water use across the United States involves recycling. If industrial and agricultural water reuse, remember that they are 90% of the users. If the reuse increased to 15%, it would more than double fresh water available for U.S. residential use. Okay, so that is a really worthwhile goal. If we can get industrial and agricultural water reuse from the current level of less than 1% to 15%, we double the amount of fresh water available for people. That's a super cool thing, isn't it? All right. Finally, the big news of the day was that Kevin Harrington joined the OriginClear Board of Advisors. I will cover that separately in a moment. And finally, last night, I appeared on My Worst Investment Ever. He has a great show where he interviews people on their worst investment ever. And let me tell you something. Well, he heard about my worst investment ever for the first time. It's the first time I told anybody, frankly, at all. I think there's like one other person in the world that knows about this. And that person, I haven't talked to in many, many years. So it was a really good show and lots of fun. All right. So that gets us through the X. And now we're going to flip back to Kevin Harrington, who is the original shark. And sure enough, he has joined us to help increase recycling rates in America by enlisting an army of us, as I call it, America's everyday investors, to help crowdfund water independence projects for industry and agriculture. So he has amazing stats, as you can see, and it's amazing. I mean, look, he and he's got to be in the same age range as me. He looks amazing and got his hair. But more importantly, he actually created the infomercial. He created the as seen on TV. These are things that we were seeing in the 80s, for God's sake. He was one of the original sharks. So, and he's driven a lot of amazing successes. Many of you know about, if you've seen Celsius in the stores, that's a zero sugar energy drink. That was a huge success. I'm told that he took that stock from 10 cents to $250 plus. Well, that's not a bad thing. Not saying that he will in this case. This is, of course, all cases are different, but he clearly is a very strong player, and we're so impressed. Keith Rutten says, saving the world. I feel like Captain America. Indeed, you are, sir. All right, and here's the announcement. He's now on our board of advisors. And he basically is super excited about our approach. And essentially, Kevin is going to own the big splash about the crowdfunding. That is what we think is going to be the most effective use of his time, because it's a very populist message, right? It's not a few accredited investors, it's basically everybody getting involved, right? And again, here's that stat. OriginClear has estimated that if industrial and agricultural water reuse increased to 15% from the present 1%, the fresh water available for residential use could more than double. All right, as you know, I first met Kevin on his Boom America show. You've seen some of the videos from that. That was lots of fun. And of course, his company, he's bringing an entire company, not just himself. There's a whole team with resources and marketing and PR and so forth. And so they are compensated for what they're doing. But most of their compensation is not even in stock, it's on options to buy stock. So he's really risking his reputation to help us. I'm really proud of him on that. We've played a little bit with our message, so I wanted to, this is from the current press release. Once a government monopoly, the business of treating and reusing sewage water is going private. Local industries and communities are now treating in place enabling large-scale recycling while also responding to the challenge of water scarcity and climate change. Our approach is dramatically simple, support that new trend, and open the door to everyday investors. OriginClear's Water on Demand subsidiary combines project financing, a veteran engineering company, and downsized pod technology, that's my latest term, all to serve the new breed of treat-in-place commercial water recycling and treatment systems. This entity has entered into an agreement to merge with a NASDAQ blank check company. All right, and then this is a statement having to do with Test the Waters. We're going to be premiering a site where we'll be driving people to put their information in. So they do everything short of actually putting the money in. And we will not accept money until this thing is registered. But this way people are they've done all the paperwork, and it's not much, but they fill out their form and they're ready to go. All right, we're going to do a quick podcast here that was shot a few days ago. So let's take a look at this one. This is a well-featured podcast. Here we go. I'm a strong believer in the power of technology to transform everything. At the same time, there's no such thing as a high-tech company anymore. All companies have a technology aspect today. There's just no getting around it. So what's my technology angle in water?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shades of Entrepreneurship. This is your host, Mr. Gabriel Flores. Today, I am here with Riggs, who is calling in from beautiful Clearwater, Florida, just the opposite end of the United States of where I am at, Portland, Oregon. But today we're going to be talking about water filtration, which is actually really important. Riggs, I'm not sure if you know this. I've been watching True Detective on HBO, and they've been talking about filtered water and the importance of it. But before we get on that, Riggs, I would love you to introduce yourself.
Well, I'm still on a voyage of self-discovery. But I can tell you this, I came up through tech. In the 80s, I had a tech company in New York City. Then in the 90s, of course, the .com was paradise for me. I loved it, had a great time, learned disruptive marketing, had a career that took me all the way through the software industry. I was a happy camper, but my downfall was ambition, right? That's the entrepreneur's downfall. And I thought I could be a CEO, and some people agreed with me, but then they said, well, but we're doing green, we're not doing no tech. And so we launched a company called at the time Origin Oil, because it was to convert algae into a biofuel. So algae was the original oil, right? What was special about it was, the funding. Now, funding is the crux of all entrepreneurship. And what this particular group did was they immediately took you public in the penny stock space. And by the way, it's not something I recommend today. It doesn't work the same way anymore. But back in 2007, it seemed to work okay. We launched this company in the algae industry, and it was a blast. I had a lot of mainstream media. It was super exciting. Unfortunately, the algae space was completely made irrelevant by the price of crude, which went from 120 down to like 50 and below. It still really hasn't recovered. It's crazy, despite inflation and everything else. We really realized that closing the company was not an option. So what do? We repurposed the technology to clarify water, because our tech was to extract algae from the water it lives in, and this was to now we were extracting sewage from the water it lives in. Immediately, I found out that the water industry, number one, people take it for granted. I've opened the faucet, water comes out, flush the toilet, water goes away. What's the problem? There's no problem. Let me focus on something important. And secondly, the media really could have cared less. They're like, really, water? And they're trying to stifle a yawn, so whereas, I remember meeting with a Fast Company editor in Manhattan, and normally Fast Company, so tell me about this cool new thing you got. I say water, they go, oh my God, no, please don't talk to me about water. And the third thing is that the water industry itself is very change phobic. They like the way things are right now. Now, unfortunately, that where it's at is not great. The water industry is not in a great place at all. All kinds of interesting things, for example, way underfunded by literally $100 billion a year by now in the US alone. It's a number that is almost incomprehensible. And even if you were going to build big central sewage systems, where we're going to build it, right? Things are built out. Additionally, since COVID, there's been a lot of migration, and there's little tiny rural water systems that are just completely overwhelmed by all the housing development and manufacturing and moving out and so forth. So it's an interesting place, but fortunately, I did find a way forward.
So yes, we're gonna briefly talk about the way forward. But first, Riggs, what you really kind of identified, is the water crisis and not being kind of spoken about. One of the things you also mentioned was it affecting those rural communities. And so, folks, I really want you guys to listen to this. I'm an Oregonian. I'm based here in Oregon, and we're 98,000 square miles. However, groundwater population in Umatilla and Morrow counties is growing worse, leading to dangerous levels of nitration in water pumped up from used safe water wells. So it's like, to your point, right? And these are our rural community members. This is not a big, I think sadly sometimes maybe why it's not spoken about is because it is kind of in a lower population density area where it's affecting a lot of communities and it's not hitting that metro area. And so folks listening, because I know there's a lot of Oregonians listening, I really want you to begin to think about this. And so I hope this, the lecture in particular, this conversation is very important because this is actually affecting us here in the state of Oregon. So Riggs, tell us, what is your current venture or business? What are you currently doing?
What we were trying to figure out at the time was how to take this technology, which had been born in algae, and we were transferring it over to water, how to license it out. And that was going nowhere. And finally, I realized that technology takes a decade or more to be accepted in water. So we turned to a commercial model. And specifically, I learned from some early research in 2016 that decentralization is a thing in water. Industry and agriculture is responsible for 90% of all water demand in the United States. In the world, actually, it's 90% all around. The ratio between business and agriculture, of course, varies according to, Somalia, it's almost all agriculture. Here, it's about half and half. The big users are not the people. The big users are the industry and agriculture. And in California, I was in California until the 2020, and we were talking, take shorter showers and so forth. Well, if you're only 10% of the demand, that's not going to move the needle. What's going to move the needle is what you do with industry and agriculture. And so what I was predicting then would happen has since happened, which is a movement towards people, businesses treating their own dirty water. Why? It's cheaper. They can recycle their water, saving even more money. And thirdly, for a lot of you entrepreneurs is you're not stuck with the politics of the local water utility. You're on your own. It's great. So a lot of businesses like it. And so it's become a thing. And so we hitched our wagon to decentralization. We bought a company that was operating in the space that does exactly that. We created another company that does these little drop into place pods for smaller sites. And finally, we devised a way to avoid the capital expense. So if you're going to do your own water treatment, you don't have a spare $1 million, don't worry about it. Just sign here and we'll give it to you as a service. And that's the latest thing. So we are firmly in the water as a service space for this new decentralized thing.
And one of the things you kind of mentioned too was like inflation. How does inflation affect the water and things that are going on? Like, where is inflation going and what are the threats?
Water and sewage rates have been inflating now faster than college tuition.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And much faster than health expenses. And the reason is, I told you that there's this big deficit annually, so utilities are trying to make it up, but they can't raise rates enough. And unfortunately, it's also creating a lot of defaults by ordinary people. And now you're poor, you can't pay your water bill. Now you're stuck with bottled water. It's even worse. It's a terrible situation, and yet it's a growing problem. There's big inflation in water, which is why businesses would want to do their own system, because you have the cost of the system and you're done. You're not, whatever the costs are of maintaining it, there's inflation, but it's not the crazy inflation. So that's a big, big deal.
That's good to know because I think I can finally go and tell my wife, hey, Riggs told me that water prices are going. I'm not crazy. I swear I'm not taking longer showers. It is the inflation of the water that is making it go up. Now, Riggs, I like to invest on the side. I like wealth management. I like to kind of build up my own generational wealth. Now, with that, I'm beginning to think of like, okay, utilities. I can go purchase gold. I can go purchase silver. Is water going to be the new gold? And why is it that investor like myself, why can't I invest directly in a water project?
But you're feeding me questions that are perfect for me, because there's been a problem with investing in water because it's been a monopoly, right? Water utilities, they're the source of the water. And by the way, we're not talking about changing that. The water should still come from the utilities, because every attempt to privatize fresh water has been a disaster. But I'm talking about treating the dirty water, and that has been a monopoly. And so you could either invest in American Water Works, Veolia, Suez. Suez got a purchase, but Evoqua, et cetera. Okay, but they just grow the way S&Ps grow. Fine. You can invest in an ETF. Fine. But if you want to make an asset investment, that's been lacking. When I told you that we're creating water as a service, and people don't have to pay for their machine, well, then who does? And so we created an investment vehicle very similar to oil and well, called master limited partnerships in the gas and oil space. And it pays dividends just like that. And there's equity rewards, ownership of the parent company, ownership of this new company called Water on Demand. And what's great is you can place a lien on the equipment to enforce your royalties, because the ownership is not handed over to the end user. We continue to own it, and they pay by the gallon. It's a profitable model because, like all services, I mean, I remember when you could pay $120 for Microsoft Office, and that was it. Now you pay, $14.99 a month. So it adds up to a lot more over time. And yet we like it because they're much more responsive. They throw more things in for free. I don't mind paying monthly with Microsoft 365 because of all the value they add. So it's more profitable, and the end user likes it more. So Water on Demand now is an investment vehicle. And by the way, we're not the only people doing water as a service, but we're the only people who are making it open to everyday investors.
That's very interesting. The whole water on demand concept, and also the subscription model. I think you're seeing the subscription model really take hold in the entrepreneurship world, because as Riggs mentioned, it provides two different things that's really cool. One, it creates value for the organization by having a value stream that's a subscription model that's on a monthly payment, and then two, it creates value back to the consumer, because that consumer now feels that concierge service, right? This tailored service that's directly catered to them. And when you feel like a subscription, like, I'm not talking about like a Netflix subscription when everybody gets the same thing. I'm talking like a true subscription model. Like, for example, this morning I got an email from the Golf Now folks. I'm like, hey, by the way, you got $10 off this month on going golfing. I'm like, sweet. That is a valuable subscription to me, right? That I'm paying on an annual basis. And now, granted, they also have these tournaments that come up and all these things, but I'm willing to pay that fee because I find a value in it, right? And so for the listeners at home, think about that when you're kind of creating a subscription model. If you do decide to go that route, it's imperative that it's also valuable to the end user, not just to you, an organization. Certainly, yes, you want to create a value for yourself, right? You need to help the bottom line, but you want to make sure to feed the people that are feeding you, right? Now, let's take a step back, because I want to kind of take a step. How the heck, like you mentioned, you went from doing the algae to the water, but what were you doing before all that? Like, how did you think algae?
Well, algae was basically told to me, right? Because in the intro, I was talking about my software career, and I was having a fine time. The last company I did in the software space went on the NASDAQ, and it was a success. It was a malware company, and which is a hot space to this day. And I was the number 2. I was the president COO of that. So what happened was, I was a true entrepreneur until 1995. I did a billion things. I was in the nonprofit space. I was a ship captain for a while on ships in the South Pacific. I was a direct marketer. And then I built a company in New York City that computerized companies for the first time, because back then it was all safeguard ledgers. And then it changed radically in the 80s. And I was part of the transformation. And then end of 80s, early 90s, I did living in LA, I did the obligatory working in film thing. Everybody in LA does that. So I went through that, loved it. But ultimately I was drawn back to tech. And in the mid 90s, my tech career, I went corporate. 1995, I went corporate and I started launching brands in, public companies and having a great time doing it. And so that was kind of my thing. I had several liquidity events, where you get to, it's always interesting when you sell a company to see how much it gets destroyed as part of the sale. But nonetheless, we made out okay. And it was really this about my ambition to become a CEO. And I was given you want to be a CEO, do algae. Okay. And I happened to have a brother who had a patent that could be applied to the algae space. And so we had a technology. Now, I believe that technology is the big transformation. For example, look at climate change, right? All of the solutions that we're being fed are solutions that themselves are fossil fuel hungry, right? Except for nuclear power. And I used to bring up nuclear power all the time. It takes 20 years to build a nuclear plant, blah, blah, blah. Now, literally, I saw a Chinese company that created a nuclear powered smartphone. I wouldn't buy that. Okay. I wouldn't carry around a nuclear reactor in my back pocket. I'm just saying. But the point that it makes is that you can go small, right? You could have a housing development or an office building being powered for 500 years by one pellet of uranium, right? What I'm saying is that if we implemented that, the whole climate change picture would change. We wouldn't have to worry about, whether we have to eat insects or not. We would just have nuclear power replacing fossil fuel, end of story. So I feel the same way about technology in high tech, that is highly transformative. When you think about, I have a computer right here, right?
Yeah.
That computer is so much more powerful than the mainframes we used to deal with in the late 60s. So I'm a strong believer in the power of technology to transform everything. Fine. At the same time, there's no such thing as a high-tech company anymore. All companies have a technology aspect today. There's just no getting around it. So what's my technology angle in water? And that's why we moved very quickly to decentralization. It breaks the monopoly. And just like how AT&T turned into a huge industry, AT&T got broken up and it became everything, including the internet. Well, no more Princess phones, but a huge industry. Same thing's happening in water. As it breaks up, it creates all these entrepreneurial opportunities. For example, Water on Demand is a pure fintech. We're there to raise money to put into these systems. But then in Seattle or Oregon, we're not going to go install and maintain these systems. We're going to delegate it. Well, that creates an entrepreneurial opportunity for all those water companies. Water on Demand comes along and says, here, I got a check, go build it. It's so wonderful for them. So people love it. They're excited about it. And we've started to get into very interesting new verticals. For example, mobile home parks, trailer parks are a huge vertical that every single one of them needs better sanitation. 90% of them have bad sanitation because how they were built. So now there's groups that are going in there and just going serially going in there going and they want the pods, they want the water as a service, they don't want the capital requirements. This is ideally made for it. And so we doubled our business 21 to 22. Our water pod business grew 7 times between 2021 and 2023. So it's going fast. So, we're very excited about that. And Water on Demand is now slated to go to the NASDAQ is being purchased by one of those blank check companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we've birthed a company, achieved a $32 million valuation for it as a private company, and we have it in a definitive merger agreement, and that's going through the SEC process right now, which makes it even better for the purpose of being an investment vehicle for people. Well, there we go. Let's just invite our friends, because it is the freewheeling discussion.
I enjoy even speaking to our investors because they come up with ideas I never thought of, right? Or ways of describing it. Like the other day, the guy from Barron said distributed utility. And we're like, oh, that's great. We've been talking about this thing for what, 2 years? And this guy in 3 minutes goes distributed utility. And we're like, holy crap, how did we not think of that? So I think speaking to lots of people about this and having, not just speaking at them, but having a dialogue like you do or like we do in these interviews really opens us up to and able to tap into tons of really smart people out there who can come at this or look at this through a lens or from an angle that, we may not yet have as many ways as we've flipped this over and looked at it from what we thought was every possible facet. You find new angles every day, which is great. It's exciting.
Well, AJ and I know that if you're a marketer, you're always wrong, because you can't possibly have the public's point of view, and you constantly have to run that survey says. And a great example of it, AJ, was really our epiphany over this whole recycling thing, which has driven a huge amount. I mean, why don't you bring us up to date on what's been happening with that messaging?
Oh, man. Well, there's just so much. Ken and I have been doing a lot of workshopping internally just to help to reframe a lot of the way that we've been talking about it. And actually it was Josh, who's our social media manager. So if you see good things happening on social, which you should, because it's booming right now. In fact, he let me know our impressions are up. We have more impressions this month already than we had last month.
Yikes.
Completely.
What's today? The 7th? Holy smokes.
Yeah. As of yesterday, even we had it. But I think the biggest epiphany, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week, is that people get this, right? When we have to educate people, and we've been struggling with this for so long, is how do you let people understand the scope of the problems, right? How do you get them to understand that it's about the fact that we're underfunded and that the problem is centralized infrastructure and all that stuff. And you say all these words and we get them, but people just don't. That doesn't resonate with people.
There's and when you get to say people nodding their head like they understand, they really don't, right?
And even if they do, they're lost in word salad, right? They're lost in the word salad. And you say, look, it's really just about the fact that there's massive problems with our water. We're overusing, and we need to start recycling if we have any chance of just maintaining enough fresh water use to keep up with population growth. And they go, oh, how do we fix that? Well, we start treating water at the point of pollution. Oh, that makes sense. How do you do that? We've got a box, we put it on the ground, we hook it up, and boom, now all of a sudden we can treat water and they can recycle. And now you've got less pollution. We've got cleaner water. We can return more back to the groundwater, safer. And then it offloads so much of the overloaded infrastructure right now, especially with all the migrant booms and everything else we got going on. And they go, I get it. I get it.
What you get a lot? I get a lot. How come no one's done this before?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, and I'll tell you why. Because it's such a, people go, of course, like when they finally, you actually watch. I love looking in the eyes of an investor when the light goes on. They go, oh my God! Like, and of course they always ask, well, why hasn't this been? Who are your competitors? And and that's where you start to get into, like, we get into, and not word salad, we get into nerd salad, right? Where you explain that water as a service has been around for years and years, but technology limited who could avail themselves.
Yeah.
Even now, our technology is so shrunk down, it's still, it's opened it up to a market that's 100 times larger, but 1 out of 10 can actually afford it. So I say, look, the greatest trick that the cell phone companies ever pulled was saying, don't worry, the phone is free.
Right. Well, the other thing about that,
I'm
Ken,
just constantly paying for it.
right. Well, Ken and I had a really interesting conversation today as we were just kind of looking over some of the language, and I think we have, like you said, we have to constantly check our own biases and our own information. And I learned something a long time ago. It's like other people are not you. You have to treat it like it's not you. And there's a skill to learning to do that and to constantly put yourself out of it. And Ken and I were just even talking about how we talk about businesses, right? And how we continue to bring people along on the kind of educational journey of understanding the problem better. And a lot of what we were focusing on in marketing, a lot of things was helping people understand, the businesses want this too. The businesses want to be able to do this. They're tired of being beat up by the EPA. They're tired of having to pay to pump their water someplace else. And people are like, okay, but like, it's still the businesses, right?
So
that resonates with businesses.
Tell the truth. That was my bias, and you were helping break me of it.
Well, no, but it's all of our bias.
Some people don't care. So people just go, how do I benefit? How do we fix the contamination issue? If businesses can, I think that the crowdfunding audience is less. They want to see businesses thrive and all, but they're more like, but you got to do the thing,
right?
You got to do you got to accomplish the mission.
Well, and the other thing is
can benefit, great, right?
And the other thing is recognizing that we know that the businesses want this, right? We don't actually have to sell the businesses.
Well, that's the idea, right?
You set Dan out and just have him go talk to a room full of engineers, and they're like, "Where have you been all my life?
Yeah.
I need you. I want you. Please, where do I sign? How can I do this?" Because it's such a powerful, innovative, compelling offering from a business perspective. But again, we have to really continue to bring ourselves back to the mission of improving and recycling more water to benefit ourselves and the planet, because that's how ultimately we get people to understand and connect with the problem like we do. We're just further down the rabbit hole. We're like, yeah, okay, we understand this is a massive problem. What do we do to fix it? Right.
I think that predilection that I was demonstrating was for Riggs and I. For years, we're trying to go. We were like, no, water really is a problem, and they were like, no, it's not. Like he said in that video, what? I flushed the toilet, everything's fine, right? So we had to describe how businesses were being bankrupted, driven out of business. So in other words, you had to convince the audience that this was a need. Now they're like, no, dude, I'm coming to you. You don't need, right? So these people, by conquering the consulting engineer audience, by truly what Dan did was evangelized. He sat out there and preached at the pulpit for 2 years and 3 years during COVID. And he got these engineers to recognize this is a construction-free modality. So even if it's slightly more expensive, it's tens of thousands of dollars less expensive than the construction costs associated with inferior products that last a fraction of the time. You got me. Now, once you got them, they do your job for you. Right? They're saying, wait, no, I got your guy. Why? Because it's going to be easier for me as a businessman, as an engineer. It's going to be easier for me I can feel comfortable with it. This is the future. And then when we remove the capital barrier, he can now have these conversations and they know up front when they give the quote, the guy goes, yeah, I don't have that. He can say right up front, look, whether or not you want to purchase this or not, you can still avail yourself of it. So now you go from let's say 60% of your contracts are basis of design, which is what we currently are. Well, if the conversation happens at the very beginning, listen, whether you can afford it or not, I can still put it there. I think you can go to 99% basis of design.
Well, of course. But the really interesting part about again, this kind of evolution, and Riggs kind of coined the army of us term, which I really like, right? Is we're taking it to the next level. You guys have done the evangelizing. Dan's done the evangelizing. We have the buy-in of the businesses. The products are a success. What we ultimately need in order to take everything to the next level and actually start to make the kind of change we need to have happen in this entire space is we need the help of investors. We need the help of the army of us to be able to then take control of this from the massively underfunded failing infrastructure, right? And to be able to put that to good use to be able to rapidly expand our ability to produce these boxes and also provide them to people that absolutely want them. You know, we stumbled across a stat this week that left my jaw on the floor, that our infrastructure is so bad, right, that we have over 240,000 water main breaks across the U.S. alone.
A year.
Just the U.S. a year, that loses 2 trillion gallons of drinkable water as a result.
Right. And so I went to chat.
Insane.
Well, wait a minute. That's what the AI data centers are going to start using. That same order of magnitude is being lost.
Absolutely. So I went to chat GPT and I said, how much water does the average human being drink a year? Well, you'd be interested to know that it's roughly 365 gallons per year. So that 2 trillion, it's a gallon a day, gallon of water a day.
Okay. All right.
When you think about it, that's what they tell you supposed to drink. Most people drink less. I drink about a gallon of coffee.
Okay. With this, you're not including showers and dishwashers and so.
No. Drink. Just drink.
Got it. Yeah.
In other words, in order to sustain life, right?
Right.
Because we don't have to shower with potable water if you want to get nasty. So that's enough to satisfy the supply. I forget the word I used, but it was nearly 10 million people for a year. That's what we lose.
Yeah.
Just because of infrastructure sucking. Like that alone is just like, wow. You think about how much, a leaky faucet can cost you personally if it's running all day, right? Like, all of a sudden my bill went up by $50 because I had this random slow leak, right? I don't know why it happened. It's 2 trillion gallons.
Oh, I had the leaky toilet and I got a bill one month and it said you used 40,000 gallons. I'm like, 40,000 gallons. And it turns out it was just the toilet running. I ignored it. I was like, it's tight. It's just a couple drops, And it was a 40,000 gallon month. And I was like, oh my Lord, it was like an $800 bill. So you want to talk about also non-revenue water, Riggs, is something you and I talked about.
NRW, which is as much as 40% in some cities.
What's the cost of 2 trillion? Like, what's the lack of remuneration that these public utilities lost in 2 trillion gallons? It's inconsequential in terms of human life, but it's a broken business model. So to contemplate that this one paradigm shift, which is the on-site co-location adaptation. Forget about the managed services on top. Just the co-location adaptation alone literally eliminates that once done at scale. And that becomes such a mission. So there's a meme that I see on Facebook sometimes, and you'll see there's the guy up on the litter and he's whipping the people who are carrying him. And then one guy stops and turns around. And then it's 2 guys stop and turn around. Then next thing you know, it's the entire crowd that turn around and they're facing the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh is cowering. That's the army of us.
Yeah.
We can't possibly carry this thing by ourselves. But I believe now that social consciousness about the state of our water is so high now. It's so at the surface. It no longer requires our previous 10-minute preamble as to why it's important. They go, no, I get it, right? I have to stop doing it because I got so used to having to explain why it was important. Now people are like, no, listen, we've been thinking about this for years. So I think social consciousness has caught up to us. We were never wrong, Riggs. We were just really early.
Well, let me tell you a scary stat, because modular water systems grew 7x between 2021 and 2023, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other day, Dan Early confessed to me he has not sold for a year and a half. He's been working off his backlog and he increased 7x, and nobody was selling in his division.
Yeah, we need to get some engineers in there.
No. Don't worry about it. He's already
done. He's already good.
He's cranking so much. He went back to work. Okay, fine. In January, he started selling again. And I'm getting these texts from Colin Sherman. We just closed this, which is 400,000, 500,000, 300,000, bong, bong, bong,
I
bong.
saw those.
It's happening. So the point I'm making is, even without selling, he was 7xing the freaking company. That's the crazy part. Now, he finally drew down the backlog, good thing, and then built up the engineering team and so forth. We are adding, by the way, a marketing support engineer, coordinator, call it what you will, to do more of that stuff. But Dan is writing quotes as fast as he can. Now, I have some very important piece of expertise, because you mentioned that showers don't have to be potable water, right? Well, as a sailor, I know that you often have to take saltwater showers, and the recommended soap for saltwater showers is Lifebuoy. You heard it here.
Oh, the Lifebuoy.
I can sleep tonight, because that would have bothered me. Gee, what soap do I use?
Literally, I was in the South
saltwater
Pacific.
shower that I don't have.
This is knowledge we had in the South Pacific, but I wanted to also bring in the fourth member of the freewheeling discussion right now, and let's have him have the last word. This is one of the very first videos he sent me.
Hey there, Riggs, Ken, AJ, how you guys doing? It's Kevin Harrington here, and I just want to say we are super excited about being involved with you guys. OriginClear, water on demand, awesome business, and we are excited, looking forward to seeing you, looking forward to getting together and making the next steps huge. So thanks for having faith in us, and we're excited. Let's go, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
That was the message he sent to us right at the beginning of our talks. And of course, it turned into what it is. I'm super excited about this. We're going to have to, of course, wrap up this show next week. We're going to have more. In fact, Ken is going down.
And I'll have some tape for you,
because I'll be doing the show from out of town, but Ken will be in St. Pete, because we're going to do a hard launch of this whole crowdfunding. Remember that we will not be taking investments until this thing is registered. Now, why is it not registered right away? It's because the timing of it is such that as to require that the annual report be part of the registration, and the annual report can't happen until early April. So long story short, this thing will be probably live in early May, but we will be getting people signed up and on board, this army of us. And
they'll be reserving their position.
Yep.
That's what this is a firm reservation. If you want it, there won't be a commitment on your end, but it'll be our commitment to you that your spot is reserved. And that's important, because, between me, Kevin, and Riggs, we drink a lot of coffee. So there's gonna be a lot of excitement, and AJ too. There's gonna be a lot of excitement going on. So there's tons of coffee flowing. I think we're going to create a ton of excitement. And I believe that this message now, at this moment, with the consciousness that's currently out there, it really is the right moment. We've been on target, but I think for a bit, we might have been a bit earlier before we caught up with the basic social consciousness. I think it's almost completely caught up, if not with us right now. And I think that's huge.
Well, there's something called cultural lag, which is the ideas that start out being out there. Let's take, for example, the American Revolution, right? That was an out there concept for a long time. And then it caught up, and then it became a thing. And all of a sudden, like, boom, it flipped. This is the kind of thing that happens when cultural lag is taken up. I'm so excited that we're doing this together, guys. And we have a great team. So have a great week, everyone. We will definitely be having more Kevin Harrington material next week. And in the meantime, let's keep up the great work. Ken, you are rocking it. AJ, well, I don't think you're sleeping right now. So.
I'm a victim of my own success at this point.
Exactly. And keep it up. I want you to continue to be a victim. No, but seriously, we are working on making it the job more occupiable for Ken, because he can't be the lone. Well, now we can use the word shark, right? All right, everyone. Thank you. And it's been great. Catch you next week. More Kevin Harrington material.
Ciao.
Be good, everyone. Thank you.
See everybody.